In 2003, a man robbed a bank while wearing a bomb around his neck. After he was quickly apprehended by police, he claimed to have been forced to wear the bomb and to commit the robbery. The bomb exploded before help could arrive, and things only get more complicated from there. Today, we explore the strangeness of the Collar Bomb Bank Robbery. Welcome back to another episode of Down with the Strangeness. I am your host, Ben, and I am excited to be back for another episode. So thank you for joining me as we once again get down with the strangeness. Special shout out today to the people who listen to the podcast or by watching on YouTube or listening through YouTube. YouTube has been a surprising bright spot since I launched this podcast. I know the videos are far from production quality or even the quality of other documentary style YouTube channels, but I do my best to add value in the videos for each episode. At the end of the day, Down with the Strangeness is very much an audio based thing, at least until I'm in a place where I'm able to dedicate more time to the show. But anyway, special thank you to our YouTube community. As a special treat to show my appreciation this week, I went with a story that would provide more visuals than a lot of recent episodes have. It'll be right up there with the Lake City Quiet Pills episode, if not more so, in terms of pictures. So head over to Down with the Strangeness on YouTube if you're not already there. And honestly, a big thanks to every single person who listens to the show, no matter where you choose to do it. This podcast is one of my favorite things to do, and I look forward to making better and better episodes as time goes on. So thanks to those of you here now while the podcast is just a little baby. Anyway, I've got a good one for us today. One with a little extra special meaning to me, given my prior experience as a pizza delivery man. A story that on its surface sounds like it was ripped from a Batman comic book. Today we're talking about the Collar Bomb Bank Robbery. At around 1:30 p.m. on August 28th, 2003, Mamma Mia's Pizzeria in Erie, Pennsylvania, received an order seemingly like any other. The call, which originated from a payphone at a nearby gas station, was originally received by the owner, Tony Ditmo. Tony had a hard time understanding the customer, and he passed the call off to delivery man Brian Wells. The order was for 2 pizzas to be delivered to 8631 Peach Street. Wells was at the end of his shift, but he agreed to take this one last delivery, a phrase that has a particularly dark meaning given the events to come. Brian arrived at 8631 Peach Street around 2 p.m., but the address was not to someone's home or an apartment complex. It was actually the location of a TV transmission tower down a dirt road off the woods, in the woods off of Peach Street in a relatively secluded area. So fast forward to 2:28 p.m., and Brian Wells walks into the PNC Bank located a little further back up the road on Peach Street. Wells was holding a cane and wearing a white t-shirt with Guess written across the front of it, the clothing brand Guess, I would assume, a shirt that he was not wearing when he left Mamma Mia's a short time earlier, and one that his relatives would later claim did not even belong to Brian. And Wells also had a strange bulge coming from under the collar of his shirt. He approached the counter and he handed a note to the teller. The note said, "Gather employees with access codes to the vault and work fast to fill a bag with $250,000. You only have 15 minutes. He then lifted his shirt to reveal a heavy-looking box attached to him around the front of his neck, the source of that strange bulge that I just mentioned. Based on reading the rest of the note, the teller knew this box to be a bomb, and the teller informed Wells that it was impossible to access the vault at the time. The teller proceeded to fill a bag with as much as they could from the drawers, which came out to be about $8,700. Wells took the bag, walked out of the bank while sucking on a Dum Dum lollipop that he had grabbed from the counter. He got in his Geo Metro and he left the scene. About 15 minutes later, state troopers spotted Wells in a nearby parking lot. Police surrounded Wells, took him to the ground, and cuffed his hands behind his back. Wells began telling the state troopers an unbelievable story. He claimed that when he arrived at that one last delivery from earlier, he was approached by a group of men who held him at gunpoint before attaching the bomb to his neck. Police were close to Wells initially, hearing his story and talking to him until they visually confirmed that Wells claimed to have what appeared to be a bomb strapped around his neck. The police then backed off, putting some distance between themselves and Brian Wells before calling the bomb squad. Officers reported thinking initially that it was fake, but they followed protocol, which their protocol is treating every bomb threat as if it is real. And it's at this point, while they're waiting for the bomb squad to show up, that the media begins to arrive. Cameras pointed at Wells, who was still seated on the ground of the parking lot with his hands cuffed behind his back. Initially, Brian Wells was concerned but relatively calm. He continuously spoke to the police, insisting that it was real and wondering why nobody was coming to remove the bomb. His calmness began to slip away rapidly when the collar around his neck began beeping, slowly at first, but gaining speed as the seconds passed. Wells became visually uncomfortable at this point, and his communication with authorities became more desperate. After a few seconds of the accelerating beeping, the bomb strapped to Brian Wells detonated. It violently sent Wells backwards, blasting a 5-inch gash in his chest, and after a couple final breaths, Brian Wells died right there in that parking lot, and all of this occurred on live television. Tragically, the bomb squad finally arrived about 3 minutes after the bomb detonated. And while processing what had just happened, police began trying to figure everything out. Based on the design of the bomb, investigators could tell that while it was a homemade bomb, it was done very well and likely made using professional quality tools. They also began searching Wells's Geo Metro, where they found another homemade wonder, a gun that had been modified or designed to look like a cane that was about 2 feet in length. Along with the gun, they found the strangest piece of evidence in this entire story. Investigators discovered pages and pages of handwritten notes addressed to, quote, bomb hostage. The notes directed Wells to rob the PNC Bank of $250,000 before following a complex set of further instructions. These instructions were then to be used by Wells to deliver the money to the perpetrators before being led to find various keys and codes scattered throughout Erie that would help free him from the collar bomb. Police began following these instructions as they were laid out for Wells, and after they find the next couple clues, they were led to a road sign about 2 miles south of the PNC Bank. They were told that's where they would find a jar containing further instructions, but when police found the jar, it was empty. The perpetrators either intended to send Wells on a wild goose chase where this jar would have been empty for him in the end as well, ultimately sealing his fate, or more likely, or equally as likely at least, perpetrators bailed on their sadistic scavenger hunt once Wells died and the police became involved. Either way, that was the end of this trail for investigators, but obviously not the end of the investigation. They followed up with Mamma Mia's, where they didn't learn much aside from the fact that the order was for 2 sausage and pepperoni pizzas. They then went to the delivery address from the order, 8631 Peach Street, the location of the transmission tower, where Wells claimed to have been abducted and outfitted with the collar bomb. They were able to locate and identify tire tracks and footprints, all belonging to Wells and to his Geo Metro, but the site unfortunately offered no clues towards figuring out who did this and ultimately what happened there to Brian Wells. The next day, August 29th, 2003, a reporter from the Erie Times-News decided to head up towards the transmission tower and try to get a look of their own. But when they discovered the dirt road leading to the tower was closed by authorities, the journalist began looking at other options. That's when he spotted a heavyset man in overalls pacing in front of the home next door to the tower. The man's name was Bill Rothstein, and his backyard went nearly all the way to the tower itself. The journalist asked Rothstein if he could use his yard and get a closer look at the crime scene. Rothstein agreed and actually led the reporter through the property to the edge right by the tower, but unfortunately the reporter still struggled to see anything and ended up leaving Rothstein's house after only about 15 minutes. Now, why do I bring this up? Why do I mention Bill Rothstein here? Yes, he was the neighbor to the location of the crime scene, but he was never really investigated or suspected by authorities, at least initially. I bring Bill Rothstein up because on September 20th of 2003, less than 1 month after the death of Brian Wells, Bill Rothstein called 911. Rothstein told dispatchers that there was a body in the freezer in the garage of 8645 Peach Street. 8645 Peach Street was the address of Bill Rothstein. Police quickly brought Rothstein into custody, and immediately he begins to talk. He told police he had been in mental agony for weeks, agony which Rothstein claims led him to consider suicide, even going as far as to write a suicide note. Investigators found this note in a desk at Rothstein's home. The note identified the body in the freezer as Jim Roden and claimed that Rothstein did not kill him, nor did he participate in the killing. Now, it might seem like we've gotten a long way from the Collar Bomb Bank Robbery story that we've been telling, but we're actually closer than you probably realize. Bill Rothstein's suicide note opened with one strange line, almost a disclaimer. The note said, "This has nothing to do with the Wells case." Over the next 2 days, Rothstein told police everything. He claimed that he had received a call in August from an ex-girlfriend, Marjorie Deal Armstrong. He claimed that Marjorie called him, told him that he shot her live-in boyfriend, James Roden, in the back with a 12-gauge shotgun in an argument that was centered around money. He claims Marjorie asked for his help in both disposing of the body and of covering up his crime. Rothstein then agreed, and he then kept the body in a chest freezer in his garage. He also melted down pieces of the 12-gauge shotgun murder weapon and disposed of those pieces in various spots scattered around Erie. Rothstein claimed that when it came time to complete the final act of the cover-up, where he would grind up the body of James Roden, that he just couldn't do it. And he was afraid of what Marjorie may do to him, so after considering suicide as a way out, he ultimately called 911. On September 21st, 2003, Marjorie Deal Armstrong was arrested for the murder of James Roden, and in January of 2005, she pled guilty but mentally ill and was sentenced to 7 to 20 years in state prison. Bill Rothstein actually died from lymphoma in 2004 before she was ever sentenced. And now again, it feels like we're far away from Brian Wells and the Collar Bomb Bank robbery, but again, I say we're closer than you realize. Federal agents investigating the Collar Bomb Bank robbery didn't pick up on the connection between Rothstein, Marjorie, and the Brian Wells collar bomb that connection that was made in the suicide note. This wouldn't really come onto their radar until April of 2005. A Pennsylvania state trooper contacted the federal investigators after Marjorie Deal Armstrong brought up the Brian Wells case while being interviewed about an unrelated homicide. She claimed that the death of James Roden had everything to do with the Collar Bomb robbery. Marjorie told federal investigators that she would reveal every detail of the Brian Wells Collar Bomb case if they could arrange a transfer from the Muncie State Penitentiary to the minimum security prison in Cambridge Springs. The Cambridge Springs facility would not only be a more relaxed place to serve her time, but it was actually closer to Erie, Pennsylvania. Marjorie told a story to the federal investigators that painted Bill Rothstein as the mastermind of the Collar Bomb Bank robbery. She painted herself as a minor accomplice, only providing the kitchen timers and some other small levels of assistance. She claimed that her murder of James Roden was simply an attempt to keep him quiet because she feared that he would talk. After multiple conversations with Marjorie, the feds actually suspected that she was the mastermind. And this belief was supported by talking to 4 separate informants who told authorities that Marjorie had discussed the crime in detail with them. But while they were lacking what they needed to officially say that it was Marjorie who was missing the whole thing, in late 2005, the brother-in-law of a television repairman turned crack dealer named Kenneth Barnes turned Kenneth into the authorities for his own connection to the Brian Wells collar bomb. Barnes, who was already in jail for unrelated drug charges, had been a little loose-lipped when talking about his involvement, so when his brother-in-law turned him in, he could see his already long sentence about to get much, much longer. So Barnes made what I would assume was an easy decision. He would give a full account of the crime in exchange for a reduced sentence. Barnes went on to confirm federal investigators' suspicions that Marjorie Deal Armstrong was the mastermind. He claimed that Marjorie intended to use the $250,000 as payment for the hit or murder of her father, of which Barnes would be the quote-unquote assassin, because Marjorie believed that her father was blowing through his fortune valued at one time at about $1.8 million. She thought that was hers to inherit, and he was wasting it foolishly, so she intended to have him killed. Barnes claimed to be kept in the dark about a lot of the details of the plan, but his accounts checked enough of the boxes that authorities needed to continue moving forward. In July of 2007, U.S. Attorney Mary Beth Buchanan announced that the investigation was officially over. After more than 1,000 interviews and 4 long years, they finally had what they needed for an indictment. And the names on that indictment, Marjorie Deal Armstrong was the mastermind, as well as Kenneth Barnes, Bill Rothstein, and Brian Wells. That's right. Brian Wells, the pizza man who was outfitted with the bomb and died upon its detonation in that parking lot. Investigators believed that Wells was in on it from the beginning. They believe Wells agreed to rob the bank wearing what he believed to be a fake bomb, and that the instructions that he had for this sadistic scavenger hunt were simply a way to throw off the police and any possible investigation. If Wells was caught, he would just stick to the story of being a hostage in this whole thing. Investigators believed that at some point, while playing the role of a hostage, Wells unknowingly became a real one. But this resolution was not well received by Brian Wells' family, obviously, or by many of the people who had been closely following and involved with this case for years at this point. It seemed that the resolution left almost as many questions for some as it did answers. Could a woman as fragile-minded and unhinged as Marjorie truly mastermind such a complicated and elaborate plan? Why would Wells participate in any capacity, right? Why is he involved in this? Kenneth Barnes pled guilty in September of 2008 to conspiracy and weapons charges involved in the Collar Bomb robbery. He was sentenced to 45 years in prison, but he agreed to testify against Marjorie Deal Armstrong in hopes of getting a reduced sentence. During Marjorie's trial, Barnes took the stand, and he told the jury everything. Marjorie Deal Armstrong masterminded the plot. She enlisted the help of co-conspirators, including himself, Rothstein, and Brian Wells. Barnes actually claimed that Brian Wells agreed to his role in the robbery in exchange for a payday, for money, that he needed to sustain his relationship with a prostitute. Barnes said he sold Wells the crack that Wells would then use as a payment to the prostitute. He claimed that Wells didn't know he was being double-crossed until he arrived at the transmission tower, but when he tried to escape, he was tackled and forced to continue at gunpoint. Marjorie was given a chance to tell her side of the story, but it didn't do much good against the evidence of the prosecution and the testimony of Kenneth Barnes. And after 11 hours of deliberation, Marjorie Deal Armstrong was found guilty on all charges: armed bank robbery, conspiracy, and using a destructive device in a crime of violence. She was sentenced to life in prison, a sentencing which she has now lost 2 appeals of. But like I said, not everyone is as convinced as the FBI and the jury. In fact, retired FBI criminal investigator Jim Fisher does not believe Marjorie Deal Armstrong to be the mastermind at all. He points to the profile that the FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit produced for the case. The next couple parts I'm about to say are pulled from that profile. The behavior seen in this crime was choreographed by, quote, Collar Bomber, watching on the sidelines, according to a written script in which he attempted to direct others to do what he wanted them to do. Because of the complex nature of the crime, the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit believes there were multiple motives for the offender and money was not the primary one. Fisher argues that this does not match Marjorie, and I don't necessarily disagree. So who does Fisher think masterminded the whole thing? Well, that FBI profile also states that the bomb builder would be, quote, comfortable around a wide variety of tools and shop machines. He was, quote, a frugal person who saved scraps of sundry materials in order to reuse them in various projects. And he was, quote, the type of person who takes pride in building a variety of things. To Fisher, that sounded like a description of Bill Rothstein. Rothstein was a handyman who had the skills to fabricate such an elaborate explosive device. Fisher also thought Rothstein fit the description of the mastermind directing others according to a script that only he seemed to have access to. Fisher believes that Rothstein was controlling the narrative from the beginning. That was his 911 call or that his 911 call was simply another calculated 200 IQ move from the man who was a true criminal mastermind in all of this. Fisher had the following to say about the ruling of the court, and this is him talking about Bill Rothstein. The son of a bitch ended up winning. He died with all of the secrets. He died taking all the answers with him. He gets the last laugh in that sense. He escaped punishment. He escaped detection. He left us with these idiots and a bunch of questions. End quote. So was this a case of, as prosecutor Marshall Piccini, I think it's funny is that I definitely didn't look that up ahead of time, but was this a case, as the prosecutor said, of twisted, intellectually bright, dysfunctional individuals who outsmarted themselves? Or was this one man who outsmarted everyone, including his co-conspirators and including the authorities? I will leave that decision up to you. That is the story of the Collar Bomb Bank Robbery, and that is the end of our episode. I want to thank everyone so much for listening. It would mean a lot before you go if you could leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Just interact with the show however you may be listening. Tell me how you feel about it. Email me at downwiththestrangeness@gmail.com. You can follow the podcast on social media, primarily Instagram and Twitter, if you want some real interactions. Check out the Patreon page and the website, downwiththestrangeness.com. All of that fun stuff. You guys kind of know what to do. But yeah, that's it for today. I do sincerely hope you enjoyed it. I will be back with another episode next week. I cannot wait for you guys to join me. And until then, keep it strange.